I'm Desiree Schippers. I'm a filmmaker based out of Chicago. My film is Fail First. It is a short doc about a really common but really terrible health insurance practice that forces people to try and fail cheaper and less effective treatments for their diseases before giving them access to the ones that they were originally prescribed.
And I feel like I've heard so much about insurance industry horrors, but that was new to me. And this is kind of speaking for my privilege. You know, we just mentioned off camera, I work for Middlebury College, and Middlebury has a very terrific health insurance. And I have diabetes. My ex-wife has MS. And as scary as that has been, and as frustrating as that has been, you know, getting health insurance approval for whatever, a new glucometer for me, or experimental drug for Katie, we haven't had. I mean, again, what you experienced, what I saw on you know, when I was watching on my laptop, I wanted to jump through this screen. So tell me. And I think it's one thing for someone to experience this, and it's another to put yourself out there, to tell this story to everybody. So at what point did you decide, you know what, I'm going to turn the lens and the animation on me?
Yeah, when it was happening, I knew it was such an absurd thing. Like, it felt like I was in a Kafka novel or something really ridiculous. So I just felt like I needed to record it, and I needed to record it for my own sanity as well, because I would, it's much more complicated than what the film portrayed. I would be going between CVS, Caremark, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and my provider at the hospital that gives treatment. So it was really complicated to keep everything in line in my mind. So that was one of my reasons for recording. And then another was that it was just so crazy, I feel like nobody would believe me unless it was recorded. And I didn't have big cinema plans for it. I just flipped open my 2017 laptop and turned on the tiny little webcam and started recording myself. And most of the phone calls are at least 2 hours long, because a lot of it is just sitting there listening to the music.
Listening to that music, or you are, you know, wait time is... Exactly.
And honestly, that's another element of it all, is that luckily I was a student at the time, and or I had just graduated from undergrad, and COVID had hit, and I was living with my parents, and I had time to sit.
So you had the time to do this.
Yeah, most people don't have time to sit and argue with their insurance people and sit on those phone calls.
So they just
it is
accept.
You do. And I think some of the reason that I was able to push my case through faster is because I was very persistent. Because it seemed a little suspicious to me that in real time, while we're on the phone, it suddenly got approved. So I think it's an insane experience what people have to go through.
I have this image of someone on the other end of that, you know, sitting there listening to the music playing along. It's like, I wonder how long I could go before they get frustrated. So you say that, you know, it was just to document the experience, literally with your laptop. At what point did you think, I think this isn't just for me to, you know, prove to people that I experienced it, but there's something more to this than my own little video log?
Sure. I had a project in school. I went to an MFA program at Northwestern. I had a really wonderful professor who was giving us prompts, and I made a short project out of just the audio, because everybody, I don't know, most people hate looking at themselves, and it's a very hard thing to do, to put yourself out there. So I just had the audio, and I had this little doodle of myself. And I felt like I could have more empathy for her, for that little version of myself, than I could for my physical form. And so I presented the phone call and the doodle, and I couldn't really animate. I just moved it around in Premiere Pro. And my professor was like, "What are you doing? Let me see your face." And he was like, this audio is so emotional, why am I not seeing your face? And so it was really hard for me, but I had a wonderful cohort of who could be my first audience and who could approach it in a really loving and empathetic way to make me feel safe and comfortable to proceed going all out.
That's fascinating to me, because in my head, I had it backwards. I was thinking about, okay, where did the idea for animation come from? And how did that then take that next step of telling the story through animation and live? But in my mind, I thought of it as we're living with you, the person, and animation was a tool to kind of pull back, just for almost to give you a break, to pull back for a second, or maybe give the audience a break. This is too intense. I can't take any more of this. I'm going to close my laptop or just close my eyes. And animation sort of that person. But it sounds like it was the opposite. You were focused on the doodles.
Yeah, initially it was that. It was just like, oh, I do these little doodles.
Yeah.
I like this version of myself. But it serves two purposes for me, I feel like. So we had that initial idea, and then it also serves as, when you're on the phone, you have to be so patient, and I try to be as kind as possible to the call workers, because they're not the ones who
it's not their fault.
Make this. And
right.
I imagine their jobs as being kind of hellish, sitting there on the phone and getting yelled at all day.
Yeah.
So I try to be as kind and patient as possible with them, which is a really hard thing to do when my interior world, like, first off, I'm sick,
right.
and I feel horrible, and I've been hospitalized.
You're going through this while you were not.
Exactly. So that, I feel like the animation can represent my interior world a little bit of like, this is really dramatic to me.
Yeah.
That's why the music was kind of controversial among my group, but like it's dramatic, and to me it is like my emotional release into the film. But then it's also like, I don't hate my audience,
right.
and I want them to stay engaged.
Right.
And it's even as much waiting and bureaucracy is in the film. Some people can't sit through it, and they get bored, and they like don't finish watching it.
Right.
So it's striking a balance of exposing them to what I went through,
right.
like in a micro
right.
way, and then but also being entertaining.
Yeah,
and
it's utterly charming,
nobody will watch
but it is authentic to your feelings and your emotion too, and it's accessible. So for someone watching, they can understand the interiority of what you're feeling expressed through the animation, as opposed to trying to intuit what's going on, in your head and in your body.
Yeah, and I have to shout out my animator, Peach.
Okay.
She is incredible. She was a student in it. I took a drawing for media class, and I was a horrible drawer, but I would throw these little images up, and that's how I kind of built out my story for this. And she was an incredible artist, but she hadn't really animated on a film before, and she just took this and ran with it. It was really radical trust with her. I gave her an outline, and she made it beyond my wildest dreams.
That is amazing. Well, what a great collaboration too. So what has the experience been like? We've talked about this being incredibly personal, and how it can be uncomfortable for you just to see yourself on screen. What is it like to be in a place where other people are watching you? What is that like?
It's surreal. Yeah. It's funny because you sit there, and especially at the point where you've just finished the film, you've watched it, it feels like a million times, and you're kind of numb to everything. And then it's amazing when I hear people laugh, and I hear people gasp, or I see their jaws drop. And that's a wonderful feeling to me of connection and community. Because I forgot that it was funny. Like it became a horror film to me a little bit. You're like reliving these worst parts, and then you hear people laugh, and you're like, oh yeah, that is crazy, and it's funny. So. Oh,
I love that. So I don't want to take you out of the moment, but do you have ideas for your next? I know there are always projects that you're working on, but like, do you have an idea for perhaps taking a step into a feature length, or do you have another short in your head that would be perfect for the medium? What's next for you?
I do. I have a little seed of a film growing that I think will start out as a short and then grow into a feature. I'm very, very interested in rural women and how a lot of women, so I'm from Colby, Kansas. It's a really tiny town in northwest Kansas. And a lot of women there have babies very young, and it impacts them socioeconomically.
Sure.
It's not a bad thing, it's not a great thing, but that is what it is. So I would like to explore that in my family as kind of an intergenerational piece. But I think the first short that I could build off of would start with me and with my experience. I experienced an ectopic pregnancy last year, right as Roe v. Wade overturned.
Oh, wow.
And I had to have an emergency surgery, and it was a really scary experience. And it was the same week that Kansas legislation had a bill whether to ratify abortion rights or not. And I was very proud because they voted to
Kansas
protect.
Stepped up.
They stepped up. And so that's a theme I want to explore, is like rural women and their choices and their beliefs and how they're much more complicated than what's portrayed.
That's what I was going to say. It's a complex story. I think the state of Kansas proved that in that moment, and I can only imagine there are microcosms of that if you want to get down to like the county level, just staying within the state, but the county level in Kansas, and then the town level, and then maybe even the neighborhood, and then if you want to expand beyond the state. I was speaking with a previous filmmaker about not only documentaries focusing on underrepresented people and areas, but areas that are misrepresented. And I think that we are increasingly falling into kind of fixed beliefs about who people are and what they believe based on where they live. And as Kansas has shown in just that one moment, life is not nearly so linear, and there are complexities. So it's great that this is a story you want to tell.
Yeah, and I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to connect with my mother, who is a superhero and who's incredible, but a lot of her work is like in the background almost. It's like the domestic unseen home labor and some of the dreams she gave up for me
to do that.
How I'm the first woman in my college, or one of the first in my family to attend university. I'm one of the first women to make it past 25 without having a child, which it's a complicated thing for me, but I want to celebrate my mom and my aunts and my cousins and my grandma, so I'm just really looking forward to being able to dive in.
And it strikes me that having this experience, this first short, be so personal, what you were describing is a very personal story for you, for your family, but maybe not as intimidating because you've gone through this process first.
Yeah, I feel like not as intimidating for me.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe different for your mother.
My mom was very reluctant. She's like, well, why? Why would you want to do that? But she's brave and she's a really cool person, and I think once she's on board, then it'll make my aunts and my cousins more comfortable.
I love it.
So.
Well, I can assure you, based on conversations I've had with fellow filmmakers who have turned the camera on their relatives, whether that's their mother or grandmother or both, either for features, fictional features, or documentaries, it seems like the first question, the first response from that relative is, what do you mean, why? And then they get there, so it's great. And well, I wish you all the luck. I wish you a continued great weekend here. And we have seen filmmakers who have come here with shorts, and then they come back a couple of years later with a feature length. So maybe we'll be having this conversation again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
Of course, thanks. Okay.